Welcome to the Family Banking Show with your hosts Rob, Derek, and John, where we dive into the world of the infinite banking concept and discuss personal banking strategies to secure your legacy and build generational wealth. We're glad you're here, and we hope this episode serves you well.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Family Banking Show. We are your hosts, Derek, Rob, and John. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good, guys. I am down in Franklin, Tennessee at my sis you might notice the new background down at my sister's place, and we're down here for her birthday, and we're going to the Vikings versus Titans game on Sunday. So I don't have my becoming your own banker hat, but I do have my Vikings cap if we
Ugly.
wanted to support the team.
I'd say go Packers.
What?
How is it over there? Is it super nice? It's nice and gloomy over here.
It was gloomy last night when I flew in, but the weather's going to be good. It's going to be like 70 and sunny the rest of the weekend. So got to get to hear some live music and hang out with family and
It's some hot
Jessica
chicken.
love eat some hot chicken. Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
stuff down here. It's hot down here too. It's not
Yeah.
Minnesota hot.
Whew. Yeah. No, it'll wake you up.
Hmm.
Not expecting it. But yeah, I've been good too. My daughter just had her third birthday this past weekend,
Oh,
and
Congrats.
we celebrated with the theme of horses. Naturally, for any 3-year-old girl, just
yep.
horses. So yeah, it was a blast. But they're growing up so quickly.
Yeah.
I know. We
Like,
got my 3-year-old niece. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these little horses that you can kind of, they're like little mini ponies that have wheels and you can kind of bounce on them, and they actually every time they kind of bounce, they move forward.
Oh,
I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but we've got photos of her, actually a niece in this house that I'm actually at. Um, and she's got her pink tutu on, her princess crown, and she's riding on one of those little mechanical ponies that my parents and I went in together to buy her.
no shame.
Mm-mm. Nope.
I don't know if you can tell from the background behind me, but we've got Christmas in swing. We're already wrapping presents, and we're not one of those crazy people that, break out the Christmas tree before Halloween, but we don't even have it out now. Our rule is after Thanksgiving, then you can
Hmm.
break out the Christmas tree. But I've got some relatives that love decorating for Christmas. And so as soon as November 1st hits, they're full swing, just,
Hmm.
I
put the
love it.
Halloween stuff away, bring out the Christmas stuff. So
We're
good.
after we're an after Thanksgiving family too.
Yeah. I can't deal with that much Christmas music for that long. So, all right, guys. Well, this episode, we're going to be talking about jumping back into our faith and finance series, talking about a biblical inheritance, what it means, and whether or not it's something that we should aspire to, leaving an inheritance to our children and grandchildren and future generations. So gentlemen, either John or Rob, one of you jump in and just talk to us. What is an inheritance? Is it something that has to be material or possessions, or is it something that must be about money and wealth, or is there a different type of inheritance that can be left to future generations?
Yeah, it's I think we all roughly understand the idea of an inheritance. It's something that's passed down, from typically, from parents, from mothers and fathers to children and to grandchildren, and and then within the context of the family banking show, we talk, about whole life insurance and how that's just one of the amazing features of it is it has this tax-free legacy that you can pass down to your children by just doing what you would be doing anyway. You need to save money somewhere for emergencies and opportunities and for um, you know for the things of life. And then you also get this amazing death benefit at the same time that's continually growing, guaranteed, that you can then pass down to your children, tax free. So that's like in the context of the family banking show, we talk about inheritance, about, in that broader sense. In the faith and finance series, one of the, God talks about inheritance in the Bible. And one thing we want to make clear too is that inheritance can not necessarily money, because God blesses us financially differently throughout the globe. And so, so I think it's important that our listeners understand that inheritance, I'd say the most important inheritance that we can pass on to our children and just keep, God's creation in general is the knowledge of saving faith through Jesus Christ. And I think that's the most important inheritance that we can pass down. So we'll be talking about inheritance in the context of finances, but the first and foremost inheritance is a saving faith through Jesus. And that I think that's just an important point and that's why I love this faith and finance series. We could talk about finance a lot and whole life insurance, but we can also have some kind of side series where we can talk a little bit how it is involved in our faith as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I always assumed growing up that it meant just money, assets, real estate, material things, right? I remember my grandfather, he passed away in 2016, but he passed away with $10 in his wallet and literally nothing else to his name. And I thought to myself, like, that's his inheritance. That's the inheritance he's leaving my dad is $10, basically nothing. And uh, as I've grown up, matured, like understood really the life of my grandfather. Like a little background for me is my grandfather immigrated from Cuba back in 1968. That's where my dad was born, and like the inheritance that he brought like me, and my family is the freedom that, we can even be in the United States, the
Yeah.
ultimate risk that he brought, on his family and my dad when he was a kid, to come to America, unknown territory. He didn't speak English at the time and just picked up English. Actually, he's just a really brilliant guy, but it's far more than just $10 in his wallet that he has left for me, for my dad and our entire family. The values of just working hard. Um, Still unsure about his faith, thinking back on his life, but still he just brought so much value to our family beyond the $10 in his wallet. So it definitely means more than money. But I think it's important that we understand what the Bible does say specifically about a financial or monetary inheritance as well, so that we can know, it's a controversial topic, at least for people I get to talk to, is, I don't want to ruin my kids. I don't want to, I think Warren Buffett says I'll only maybe leave like, $10,000 to each kid. Obviously he has billions, so it's controversial in many ways, depending on, who you are, who you're hearing your advice from, and so forth. So I think it's important to at least submit to the ultimate reference and standard that we can possibly look to, which is the Bible. And so I think this is just a really important topic. It can really affect the way we think about our overall goals and generational legacy. So I'm super excited about this episode.
Yeah, and this kind of comes from a couple passages in the Old Testament. I think the one that's probably the most familiar for listeners might be Proverbs 13:22, which says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And as we were talking before the show, there's another section in Proverbs 19 that talks about a house and wealth is inherited from fathers. So it certainly does have that idea or concept of leaving something financial. Could be hard assets. We mentioned land or real estate, businesses, could be stocks of a business. Could just be cold hard cash in the form of that tax-free death benefit. But there's certainly this idea in scripture of leaving something to the next generation to help get them off their feet. I think about how in the United States, the average inheritance is between $25,000 and maybe $50,000. And that's even skewed because most inheritances are left from people who are wealthier than the average American. And so what's truly, the blue collar, middle class America really leaving? And it's not a substantial amount in the sense of, it's not going to necessarily help buy you your first house or something like that, but it could be something maybe to help get you on your feet as you're starting off in life. And, for me in my 30s, I think of, other people my age where they're not even thinking about inheritances. They're not even that forward thinking and planning for the future. It's something that's maybe reserved for somebody in their middle-aged or towards the end of their career. What are some things that you guys have done to try to instill the value of an inheritance in yourself for those future generations so that there's maybe something already in place when that time comes? What's your kind of forward thinking? How are you planning for the future?
I think that's such, I want to stress this so much to our listeners that this is one of the, in Nelson Nash's book, Coming Home Banker, he said, he says the idea of understanding how to become your own banker is caught, not taught, right? It hit me with such force that this is such a simple thing that anybody can do. You don't have to be wealthy. That's what really struck me is if you're saving money anyway. And so not only are you saving, you have to save money anyway. You can leverage your money. It compounds uninterrupted. But at the same time, it's creating a legacy for your children. So I think so often, for families who aren't wealthy, the idea of leaving a legacy for their children just doesn't never crosses their mind because that's like they're just trying to survive or they're just trying to just make ends meet and just potentially survive retirement, let alone leaving something for their children. So this is and it's such and the thing that I always think struck me about it is I don't need to be a stock market expert. You don't need advisors. You just set up a smartly designed permanent whole life policy, and you get all the amazing benefits of a high yield savings account. Plus, you have this death benefit that can protect your family while you're still alive, and it can bless your family when you eventually pass away. And all you have to do is just do what you're already doing anyway. And that's when it really hit me that this is such a powerful thing that I think people need to hear about, especially folks like the folks I grew up with, the families I grew up with. No one ever educated us about this kind of thing. And it can just change generations of families. If you just did the same thing you're doing anyway, but you just put that money into a permanent life insurance policy, you can bless your family and bless your life today at the same time. I just think it's such a powerful tool that we just need to keep sharing with people.
Yeah, littered throughout the Bible, I just finished First and Second Kings, and
Mm.
so often you see the implications of like a father's life,
Yeah.
whether or not he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord or
Mhm.
did what was right, affects future generations. And that has nothing to do with their finances, right? So understanding that you can bless your generations by what you do today spiritually, all the more like makes it easy to understand how financially that can affect your generations. And like you're saying, Rob, like you don't have to be super rich to do this. You just do you save anything? Then you can use that to build
Mhm.
legacy and your savings vehicle.
Yep.
So yeah, it's simple. I think what's interesting, Derek, on a comment you made earlier is that people in 30s, age range aren't really thinking about this. One of my one of the guys I'm working with, he is 19
Wow.
and he is so passionate about building, quote, like building something that'll last way longer than he will. He's 19 years old, and I just had to ask him, like, where is this coming from? Like, how are you already in this like mature long-term thinking mindset? And he just said, my parents did such a good job instilling those values into me. And I
Neat.
just see the blessing that they've given me. And they're not super wealthy or, high net worth. Like they're just a standard, family in the Twin Cities area, actually. And so seeing him maturing into a man at 19 who's already thinking generationally is clearly a product of the day in and day out, like discipleship, I'm going to call it, from his
Mhm.
parents. And so when you're talking about the question, Derek, of what are we doing to instill that or prepare for leaving an inheritance, I have a 1 and a 3-year-old right now, and I want to every day instill values
and disciple my children in a way that when they're 19, Lord willing, they end up just like this one guy that I'm talking about who can think beyond where they're at right now. Like most single guys I've talked to about infinite banking are like, oh, it's life insurance. I'm gonna discount that. I
Yep.
don't need life insurance.
Yep.
Um, but understanding that you're likely gonna need it at some point, right? If you are gonna have a family, but also the other, far more financial benefits that we can talk about, like, tax-free retirement income and so forth, in addition to the legacy, is just super powerful. So,
Yeah.
I just finished a book. It's called Value Creation Kid, by a guy named Scott Donnell and Lee Benson. Super helpful to understand raising children to be value creators. The author Scott Donnell, he comes from money. His father or his grandfather founded like a huge, bank and had billions of dollars to their name. And he he was raised to create value. He wasn't raised to just spend money, right? I
Yeah.
think everybody is concerned about the prodigal son
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
squander inheritance and just spend it on prostitutes and whatever other things of this world that are going to lead to destruction. Uh, I think that book, Value Creation Kid, just speaks to raising our kids with the fundamentals of like value creation and how to interact with money. And he even gives like really practical advice, of how to do that on a daily basis. And it's just a really helpful book. But all to say, I think building those values, instilling and discipling our children to, like Rob said, love Jesus first and foremost, but also to understand the competencies behind finances is just invaluable, right? Beyond just receiving a dollar from us, from an inheritance.
And there's a lot of good things that you guys are saying and sharing. And so I just want to kind of maybe try to bring this home a little bit. So when thinking about, setting up an inheritance, oftentimes people think, oh, I must have a trust in place or work with an estate planner, obviously your financial planner. All of those things are well and good. And that deals with the structure, but that's not going to give you the ultimate protection or assurance that future generations may not squander it. As John is saying, it requires ongoing discipleship. And that discipleship needs to address three levels. It needs to address the heart, the mind, and the hands. In the heart, you need to address the values behind it. Maybe that's one of those values is that long-term thinking. The mind would be that kind of that worldview philosophy and thinking of how do I create value? What's my role in God's world? And then the hands is the actual practice, instilling in your children the importance of work and effort and doing things rather than being enabled or lazy. There's a lot of verses, even in the book of Proverbs, that talk about laziness and being a glutton and how a sluggard is not going to get very far in this world. But, thinking of this 19-year-old, this is the exact person, it sounds like, who, if they receive an inheritance, is going to put it to wise use.
Right.
His parents have done a good job raising this young man, and he's already starting to think long term of how he can do this for future generations. And so he's a great case study actually of, when it's done well, what it can look like.
And
So
I go back to real quick, just to that, Derek. It's like that's a thing I think when I think of the families I grew up with, like we, the idea of being able to, we just don't feel like we have the ability to, we don't have the resources, like the people to talk to set up trusts and wills and you know portfolios. That's why I think it's permanent life insurance is so powerful because it's so simple. Do that one thing and you are setting yourself up for now and your family for the future. And that's all you have to do. That's what really like grabbed my heart. Like I got to tell people about this. And so it just leads into, training your children up right. That for those parents who think, man, that's hard to train my children up right, at least do the easy thing. Get a permanent life insurance to protect yourself and to leverage today. Just get that started. Then work on the harder part of raising your children right. Because then when you do, then you have this whole rock solid financial foundation to build from. So, so just get that going first because it's so easy. Then start working, that's my opinion. So then start working with your children to start showing them how what you have started today can bless them in the future.
Yeah, another great resource that comes to my mind when thinking about this is a book called The Family Economy by a gentleman named Rory Groves. Rory's a farmer from Minnesota, but he used to work in the tech industry, Rob.
Hmm.
Um, so here was a guy who left the tech industry to pursue kind of a more rural lifestyle with his wife and kids. And one of the things that he's taught me is, an inheritance was baked in for many families because their primary sources of income was a farm. And so from one generation to the next, what did they leave? They left property, and they left hard assets in the form of livestock even, or these were the sorts of things that was passed down. So it wasn't just cold hard cash that could be easily squandered. It was a piece of property that required work. And as children are raised on a farm, oftentimes they're put to work on the farm. And then, this is how you train somebody along the way. So when they receive an inheritance someday, if it's in the form of a lump sum, that they've stewarded that resource already for years before that happens. And so I'm trying to think of, how do we capture family banking with that sort of mentality of an ongoing inheritance that's gradually or progressively given to the next generation. And I think a life insurance policy and this idea of becoming your own banker really addresses that issue quite well, because we know not only do we have a need for finance, but our kids and our future generations are going to have that same need. And so, our family economy really may not be farming. That may not be the family business, but we have a family bank. And so utilizing it as a true bank and lending out, borrowing, paying back, all those sorts of mechanics are things that we can teach along the way before our kids maybe leave our house. And like this 19-year-old, he's clearly been taught along the way as well. So when we pass away, if we're 95 years old and our kids are, in their 70s or whatever, 60s, trying to think of how old I am, that they've already had this resource all along the way of taking loans out, paying them back, lending to others, really stewarding that wealth all along the way, instead of just that one time you're giving a big influx of cash to the next generation.
Great point.
Yeah, that speaks to another point that the Value Creation Kid book talks about is healthy struggles and being able to allow your children to struggle in an environment that you can be the ultimate risk is on you and not some other creditor or real life scenario where they're at risk. But you can control that environment. And I'm sure everybody's heard the analogy of a butterfly that's coming out of the cocoon. And then if someone were to help that butterfly come out, then it forever would not be able to fly because it needs that struggle to get out of the cocoon and develop the strength in its wings and everything to be able to fly and live a normal, healthy life and be a butterfly, I suppose. But
Mm-hmm.
that same thing, like we can cripple our kids. Like we can just do things for them and just give them a credit card and they can spend on whatever and them not appreciate or understand what is required to even get to that point of being able to spend money. And I can't recommend that book enough because I'm just basically regurgitating a lot of the principles from it. But yeah, that's huge. Those healthy struggles. If you're the farming family, then that's very practical and clear. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're stewarding this land, we're farming and taking care of what we've been given, uh, because we know it's part of our family line, and we need to, do our best to maintain it, have it flourish, and obviously provide for our family. So that's huge.
Yeah, I think, John, maybe what you're trying to get at is, as kids age, you need to give them more responsibility.
Mhm.
For our 2-year-old right now, how much responsibility can we give her? Well, She's learned how to clear her plate when we're done eating dinner. She's learned how to bring it to the sink when we're doing dishes. She obviously knows how to pick up her own toys, or, can tell when her baby brother needs a bottle of milk. It's just like little things that I think a lot of people don't realize that young children can actually handle a lot. They're pretty resilient. And if you can give them a lot of responsibility relative to their age, but if you're the adult who's just handed everything to their kids and not really entrusted them with much responsibility, I mean, what can you expect if and when you do leave an inheritance? You haven't raised them in such a manner that has prepared them to receive that. Yeah, guys, any other thoughts on inheritances?
Well, just it's such an important topic that I think can be so simply addressed with properly designed permanent life insurance. Just as the foundings, you need to start that foundation, and I think that's the easiest way just to get started. That we mentioned before, the best day to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Well, the next best day is today. Get started, get that foundation in place, then you can build from that, and it's what you're doing anyway. So just you get all the that's what I just love about permanent life insurance so much is you get all the benefits for this through this one process, this one product. Get started today.
Yeah, and then I would just say, kind of closing things out and zooming out is, I have kids. I'm thinking about myself as a father, and fathers out there, we are in some form or another like a picture, just like a representation of God as our Father, our Heavenly Father, like to our kids, right? So that's a huge weight and responsibility. And
Yeah.
just imagine like the joy and like, all the benefits that come with the inheritance that you're going to leave for your family, and how that gives them a picture, through perhaps finances or material things, but it gives them, in a picture of their spiritual eternal inheritance in heaven, that we can set up as well to model what our Father's already done for us, and that we can look forward to with certainty, like in heaven, that far greater, inheritance that we can expect. So just another way we can emulate our Heavenly Father here on earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe some closing thoughts from me would be is if you feel like you're not leaving an inheritance, or you feel like maybe some guilt about, hey, it's not that much, it's only $10. The important thing is the heart behind it, and for you to realize that whether or not you leave an inheritance to your children does not mean you are a good or a bad Christian. This is not the litmus test of your faithfulness to Christ. But it is something that I believe that many of us should aspire to do. And in recent generations, it feels like that value hasn't been there for many of us to think about. And so I hope that this podcast and this episode has helped you rethink your thinking about leaving an inheritance and how you can do that well. And it starts hopefully as young as possible, because as time goes on, as Rob has mentioned with whole life insurance as the backbone of becoming your own banker, as time goes on, it's only going to get better with time. And so starting early is to your benefit. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. In the next one, we'll probably get back to our mechanics series of life insurance and infinite banking. But be sure to stay tuned for future episodes regarding the faith and finance series. If you're at all interested in learning how to work with us, you can reach out to us at thefamilybankingshow@gmail.com. And we would be happy to schedule some time to sit down with you and your family and to document for you what it's like to become your own banker. Gentlemen, thank you once again, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Hey guys.
Nice.
Thank you for joining us. If you're interested in a conversation about anything we've discussed, you can find our contact information in the show notes below.
And subscribe, follow, and leave a review to help spread this message and to help families across the country discover the generational blessing of IBC. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time.